The old woman's hands trembled as she held a small cloth bag. Inside were 3 items: a dead bat, soil from a fresh grave, and a photograph of Pastor Mudiwa smiling on stage. She had worked in that gold mine for 37 years, cleaning the offices, sweeping the dust. But what she saw that Tuesday night in the abandoned shaft, it changed everything. "They think nobody knows," she whispered to me, her eyes darting around the small room. "They think the miners who disappeared just ran away. They think the night rituals are secret. But I was there. I saw what your pastor buried at the mine entrance. I saw what he promised, and who he promised it to." She pushed the bag across the table. "This is your proof. But be careful. The last person who tried to expose this. They found him at the bottom of shaft 7. They said it was an accident." This is Dangerous African Confessions HD, and for the past years, we've been pulling back the curtain on what really happens behind the blessed altars and miracle services of some African churches. We've shown you fake healings, exposed manufactured prophecies, revealed the cross-border schemes that leave families broken and bank accounts empty. But this one kept me awake for weeks. Because this isn't just about a pastor lying from the pulpit. This isn't just about prosperity gospel gone wrong. This is about something darker, something that connects the pulpit to the mine shaft, the offering basket to the gold veins deep underground, and the prayers for breakthrough to actual blood on actual hands. You see, Zimbabwe is blessed with gold. The same earth that holds ancient treasures has, for decades, made some people very rich and left others with nothing but dust in their lungs. But what happens when pastors, the men and women we trust with our souls, decide they want their share of that gold? What happens when spiritual authority meets earthly greed? And what are they willing to sacrifice to get it? This is an investigation started with a single phone call. A woman, crying, saying her husband went to a prayer meeting at their church. The pastor said God was opening doors for select members to invest in a gold mine. Blessed investment, the pastor called it. Her husband withdrew their life savings. $43,000. 3 months later, the pastor was driving a new Range Rover. Her husband. He hasn't come home in 2 months. That call led me to 3 more families. Then 7. Then 12. All with similar story. All connected to churches. All connected to gold mines. All ending in either financial ruin or something far worse, disappearances. But here's the question that should make you uncomfortable. What if the blessing your pastor is praying for isn't coming from heaven at all? Now, let me take you back to where this really begins. 2019, Zimbabwe's economy is collapsing again. Inflation is destroying savings. People are desperate. And into that desperation walks a new breed of pastor. Pastor Mudiwa ran a church of about 200 members in Harare. Nothing fancy. Rented hall, plastic chairs, second-hand sound system. But Pastor Mudiwa had big dreams. He watched the megachurch pastors on TV with their private jets and multiple properties, and he wanted that life. He prayed for it. He fasted for it. He declared it. But nothing changed. Until he met Mr. Zvobgo. Mr. Zvobgo owned a struggling gold mining operation outside Kodomo. Small scale. Barely profitable. He was bleeding money and looking for investors, any investors. At a business conference in Bulawayo, he met Pastor Mudiwa. They got talking. Mr. Zvobgo mentioned his mine. Pastor Mudiwa's eyes lit up. "Brother," the pastor said, "I have over 200 faithful members. Hardworking people. God-fearing people. People who trust my voice. What if I could bring you investors?" Mr. Zvobgo was interested, very interested. What happened next is the blueprint that dozens of other pastors across Zimbabwe would copy. Pastor Mudiwa returned to his church that Sunday with fire in his belly. His sermon that morning wasn't about salvation. It wasn't about grace. It was about kingdom investment. God is opening a door, he preached, pacing the stage. But this door is only for the faithful. Only for those who trust God's prophet. I've been praying, and God showed me a gold mine. Literal gold. And he said to me, "This is for my people. This is their breakthrough." The church erupted in amens and hallelujahs. He continued, "But the devil doesn't want you to prosper. So this opportunity is limited. Only those with faith will see it. Only those willing to sow their seed will reap the harvest." Within 2 weeks, 37 church members had invested. Amounts ranged from $500 to $40,000. Total. Over $600,000 poured into Mr. Zvobgo's mining operation. The members were given certificates. Investment shares, they were called. They were promised returns of 300% within 1 year. Pastor Mudiwa took a 30% commission, $180,000, for doing nothing but talking to his congregation for 20 minutes. Here's what I need you to think about. When did your spiritual leader become your financial advisor? And why does God's blessing always require your bank account? Within 6 months to 1 year, 5 other churches in Harare and Bulawayo had similar, blessed investment programs. All gold mines. All promising massive returns. All requiring faith to invest. But here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean deeply disturbing. Pastor Tendai ran a church in Mbeya. She heard about Pastor Mudiwa's success and wanted in. She found a mine owner, Mr. Gombo, who was willing to partner. But Mr. Gombo had a different condition. He wasn't just looking for money. He was looking for something else. I met with a former member of Pastor Tendai's church. I will name him Forai. He agreed to talk to me only under secrecy. We met in his car, parked outside a shopping center. The first investment meeting was normal. Forai told me. Pastor Tendai told us about the mine, showed us pictures, talked about returns. 40 of us invested. I put in $12,000. My wife's entire pension payout. He looked out the window, his jaw tight. Months later, Pastor called a special meeting. Investors only. She said the mine was experiencing problems. Spiritual problems. She said there were territorial spirits guarding the gold, fighting against our breakthrough. And she said we needed to go to the mine for a deliverance service, to break the curses, to claim our blessing. 23 investors went to that mine on a Saturday morning. They were told to wear white, bring anointing oil, prepare for spiritual warfare. What happened at that mine, according to Forai and 2 other witnesses I spoke to, was not a church service. It was a ritual. There was a traditional healer there, Forai said, his voice dropping, dressed in animal skins. At first, Pastor Tendai said he was a converted prophet, someone who used to walk with demons but now walks with God. But the things he said, the things he did, he stopped talking. His hands gripped the steering wheel even though the car wasn't moving. Forai continued. He killed the black goat at the mine entrance, sprinkled on the ground. Then he asked each of us to step in the and make a declaration of faith. He said it was covenant. He said it was Old Testament sacrifice. But my spirit was screaming that this was wrong. Question for you, if your pastor takes you to a place where blood is being spilled for your financial blessing, are you in a church or a cult? You see, Forai's story shook me. But it gets worse. Because 3 weeks after that ritual at the mine, one of the investors, a man named Tapiwa, vanished. His wife, my Tapiwa, reported him missing, last seen, leaving home to meet Pastor Tendai for what he called mine business. He never came back. The police investigated. A missing person report was filed. Pastor Tendai told the police that yes, Tapiwa had come to see her, they discussed his investment, and he left. She had no idea where he went after that. The case went cold. But my Tapiwa didn't give up. She hired a private investigator. That investigator, through his contact, discovered something chilling. Tapiwa's phone last pinged near the mine. The same mine where the ritual happened. The same mine where he had invested his money. When the investigator went to the mine to ask questions, the workers there became nervous, hostile, even. Mr. Gombo, the mine owner, refused to speak to him. Security escorted him off the property. Then, 2 weeks later, the investigator dropped the case, returned my Tapiwa's money, told her he couldn't help her anymore. When she pressed him, he finally admitted, someone threatened my family. They know where my children go to school. I can't do this. My Tapiwa came to me months later. She begged me to help her investigate. I told her I would try. I started digging, and I found a pattern. 4 other investors from churches connected to gold mines had disappeared in the past 2 years. 4, all men, all between the ages of 35 and 50. All last seen going to meetings related to their investments. One body was found, at the bottom of a mine shaft. Road an accident. Trespassing at night, fell down an abandoned shaft, the police report said. But his family swears he had no reason to be at that mine. He wasn't even an investor at that particular operation. The other 3, never found. I reached out to Pastor Tendai for comment. She refused to meet me. Her assistant sent a message, the pastor is praying for all missing persons. She has faith they will return. Any insinuation of wrongdoing is an attack from the devil. I reached out to Mr. Gombo. No response. I reached out to the traditional healer who performed the ritual. He had disappeared too. Nobody in his village had seen him in over a year. So here's the question that made me lose sleep. Are these disappearances really coincidences? Or are pastors willing to make people vanish to protect their money and their secrets? Now, I was stuck. Every lead seemed to hit a wall. People were too afraid to talk. The police weren't interested. The pastors had lawyers. The mine owners had security. Then I got a message. Anonymous. I worked at one of these mines. I know what they do. I can't come forward publicly, but I'll tell you everything. We arranged to meet. A small town outside Harare. Public place. Busy restaurant. Safety in numbers. The man who sat down across from me was thin, nervous, probably in his late 40s. He ordered tea he never drank. His leg bounced under the table the entire time. He He leaned forward. These mine owners, they are desperate. Gold prices are good, but the cost of operating are high. Equipment breaks. Workers demand pay. The government wants taxes. They are barely surviving. Then these pastors show up with investors. Real money. Cash. It's a lifeline. Okay, but that's just business, right? At first, yes. But then the promises the pastors make to their church members, they're impossible. A 100 to 300% returns in 1 year. From a struggling mine, it can't happen. So the mine owners, they start to panic. They took the money, they spent it. Now they owe these investors returns they can't pay. James looked around the restaurant. Some mine owners, they have traditional beliefs, deep beliefs. They consult nangas for everything: business, health, protection. And some of these nangas, they tell them there's a way to make the mine more productive. He swallowed hard and said, "Sacrifice." The word hung in the air between us. What kind of sacrifice? I asked, though I already knew the answer would destroy me. Human, he whispered. They believe that offering a life to the spirit of the land will make the gold more accessible, make the mine more profitable. It's old belief, very old, from before colonization. The nangas call them guardians of the earth. They say the guardians demand payment for taking the gold. I felt sick. And the pastors know about this. Some do, some don't. The ones who don't, they just think they are partnering with a businessman. But the ones who do, they justify it. They convince themselves that the blessing their church receives is worth it. The new building, the new cars, the expanded ministry. They convince themselves it's all for God's glory. Think about this: how many blessings in your church are built on someone else's curse? The thing truly is that James gave me details that made me want to vomit and quit this investigation altogether. But I couldn't. Too many families needed answers. He explained how the system works. The pastor brings investors. The mine owner takes the money. They operate for a few months, maybe show some small returns to keep people hopeful. But behind the scenes, the mine owner consults his nangas. The nangas performs divination, throws bones, reads signs, then delivers the message: the spirits are angry. They want appeasement. At first, it's animal sacrifice. Goats, chickens. The pastor is brought in, told it's traditional blessing of the land. Some pastors refuse and walk away. Their partnerships end. But others, blinded by greed or convinced they can Christianize the practice, they participate. They call it spiritual warfare, James said. They say they are claiming the land for God. But they are just putting blood in the ground. Then the mine still doesn't produce enough. The investors start demanding their returns. The pressure builds. The nangas comes back with a darker message: the spirits want more. They want what's most valuable: a human life. How do they choose? I asked. Sometimes it's random. A worker at the mine who's caused trouble. Someone who's sinned too much. But other times, he paused. Other times, it's an investor. Someone who's asking too many questions. Someone threatening to go to the police. Someone who could expose everything. And the pastors know? The ones deep in it, yes. They are told it's necessary. They are told God will cover it. They are reminded how much money they've made. How their church has grown. They are trapped by their own greed. James told me about a specific incident. A mine outside Kwekwe. An investor named Jonathan had started asking questions. He wanted to see the mine's financial records. He wanted to know why his returns were late. He threatened legal action. 2 weeks later, Jonathan accepted an invitation from the mine owner to tour the operation. See where your money is working, the owner told him. Jonathan went to the mine on a Thursday morning. By Thursday night, his car was found abandoned near the mine. His phone was off. Security footage showed him entering the mine property. No footage of him leaving. The police searched. Found nothing. Case closed as a possible runaway situation, even though Jonathan had a wife and 3 kids he adored. I was working that mine, James said, his eyes wet. I saw them bring his body out 3 days later from Shaft 4. They told us it was an accident. That he wandered into a restricted area and fell. But I saw his face. He didn't fall. Someone made sure he didn't walk out of that mine. Why didn't you go to the police? He laughed, bitter. You think the police don't know? Some of them are paid to look the other way. This is Zimbabwe. Money talks. Fear silences. Here's the question: if the police won't protect you and your pastor won't tell you the truth, who can you trust? And when does a church stop being a church and become a criminal enterprise in religious clothing? Let me be very clear about something. Not every pastor is corrupt. Not every church is a scam. There are genuine, God-fearing leaders doing real work, helping real people, with pure hearts. But this gold mine scheme, it's real. It's happening. And it's destroying lives. Families have lost everything. People have disappeared. Blood has been spilled in the name of blessing. And the pastors involved have convinced themselves that their prosperity is proof of God's favor, when in reality, it's proof of their compromise. If your pastor is pushing investments, especially in ventures you can't verify, ask questions. Demand transparency. Real spiritual leaders welcome accountability. Fake ones hide behind, "Touch not my anointed." If your pastor is involving traditional healers in church activities, calling it spiritual warfare, or claiming the land, run. That's not Christianity. That's syncretism at best, and occultism at worst. And if people in your church are disappearing or suffering financial ruin after following pastoral advice, speak up. Report it. Protect others. The old woman who gave me that cloth bag at the beginning of this story, she's still alive, still watching, still waiting for justice. The families of the missing still cry themselves to sleep. And somewhere in Zimbabwe, another pastor is meeting another mine owner, planning another scheme, convinced that God will bless their deception. But God doesn't bless lies. He doesn't honor greed. And he certainly doesn't require blood sacrifices for financial breakthrough. That ended on the cross.